CU Digital Town Hall number, I don't know, 13, something like that.
14.
14. Wow, a lot of these. And we'll be talking a little bit today. We've got a few things, but before we go, we've got some rules of the road, so let's get moving. Next slide. Your hosts are myself, John Best, and the good-looking guy on the right is Mike Lawson, who has been making his presence known. And at the top of this, Mike, I want to talk a little bit about a couple things you posted and what you talked about earlier. So we'll go to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Town hall format. So we always do a little bit of an introduction. Anybody that wants to speak as a credit union, you're more than welcome. If you have something you want to talk to about the group or something you wanted to share, we just ask that you let us know. And the way you let us know is by using the chat feature. What we want is for everybody to check in via the chat. So you just basically go to the chat, tell us you're here. When we first started this, Zoom was new to a lot of folks, but now it seems like everybody gets it, but we'll go over where the chat is just in case. Because of Zoom bombing, we need everybody to let us know that you're here. And if you don't, we'll have to remove you because we don't want to have any weirdness. So if you feel compelled to dig deeper, for instance, if someone's talking, it doesn't matter who it is, me or Mike or another credit union, reach out in the private chat and let that person know to exchange contact. If there's information that you have that is pertinent to maybe the discussion and should be shared with a broader audience, then we encourage you to post that in the chat window. If there's a sense that something comes up that's worthy of a longer discussion, we will send that over to Mike Lawson, who will turn that into a CU broadcast, which is a little bit of a different format. And lastly, but not least, these town halls are recorded and published on CU Broadcast and the Big website, and various versions of it as a podcast on the Big Kiosk Network. So very exciting, that we have that. But if it is that there's information that you don't want known to the general public and you plan on speaking or sharing that, keep in mind that it is being publicly displayed. So let's move on to the next slide. Here's how you find your way to the chat. Not that everybody doesn't know how to do this now, but if you click on the little bar at the bottom, which doesn't show unless you are engaging the window. And I know there's a few more icons down there since they've added things like reactions, which is kind of cool. There's a thumbs up. But the chat button is down there. That's going to open a little window to the right, a pop-up, and then at the bottom you'll be able to see who you're talking to. It could say everyone. It could say the name of a person. So that's how you chat with someone directly. So just a few details on that. Let's go on to the next slide here. Before I get here, I'm going to just stop for a second. And Mike, you did a little wrap up of some of the stuff we've gone over.
Yeah.
And so I thought it might be neat if you wanted to share your screen and show the CU broadcast site. Just so folks who
yeah. Let me.
If you missed some of these, know where to go look and what to do.
Let me see if I can share it because I have two monitors.
Oh gosh. Well, you don't have to share if you don't need to. That's all good.
No, I mean, just go to the CU broadcast, cubroadcast.com. And I actually posted just an excerpt of last week's visit with Brett King. I thought his visit, you did a stellar job with him, John. I mean, just, anytime you can get, Brett's kind of like a wind-up doll. You ask him one thing and then he just goes. So
yeah.
So if you want to see just like the first excerpt of what he's talked about, it's on our homepage right there. And we also have the entire webcast recording down below in our other miscellaneous videos that we post every day. And then also what we also put on there as well was a really cool story by Aspire Credit Union's Tom O'Shea. A couple of weeks ago, he told about how his credit union helped out this distressed tulip farmer in their area. And it's just a great story. I mean, it's giving me goosebumps right now.
Just putting the words distressed tulip farmer all in a row. But he did something. I think what he did was he bought tulips for, was it all the members or all the staff?
The entire staff. I think he gave them
and he gave them a budget to buy, for them to buy them as well.
And he called the tulip farmer and said, "Hey, expect at least 100 orders of tulips coming your way."
Yeah.
So that's what the credit union did for this person, because they had this big tulip event that I guess the local government shut down because of the whole COVID-19 shelter at home stuff. So the guy lost like thousands and thousands of dollars in advertising and obviously sales and stuff. So Tom and his,
But Tom does a great job of telling it too.
oh
It's
gosh,
you could
he's
just really see the sincerity and the stuff that
Yep.
Aspire and many of the creators on this. Whoa, that's pretty cool. All I
Yeah,
can see is like a Cheshire cat
ooh,
there.
you're literally a talking head.
Yeah, and there for a second. Awesome. Well, thank you for
Yeah, it's
sharing
good.
that. And it's cubroadcast.com.
That is right, sir.
All right. So let's go back to the slideshow and we'll get rolling. We got some to cover here. And really, this is kind of evolved into talking a little bit about what's going on in the banking sector every week regarding COVID. And so, this was interesting. The Fed stands behind us no matter what the coronavirus demands. So this is good to hear. Their commitment to carrying the load, particularly as we've seen with Gary Coates was on last week talking about their rolling unemployment numbers, which was pretty incredible. How it jumped, and I just did some quick math on that last time. If it keeps going the way it's going, next month would be almost 12,000. And that's doubling, and it's more than doubled the last two times, but that's a conservative estimate. But it's interesting that the Fed vice chairman has said this. What I was interested in, and I'm going to throw it over to maybe Kevin real fast just to get a little background on this, but Kevin, how do you think that they are planning on support? The only thing I can think is to continue to drop rates, and I don't know how much lower you could go.
Yeah, obviously rates are at historic lows. I think it's going to be difficult to do much there. I think what their struggle is keeping the money supply going. As we continue to have these bailout programs, they have to get involved and stand behind as well, as the government does. So
I was reading an article on that, and just a quick question, and I know you're not an expert on this, so I don't pretend, I'm just asking out loud, but as this continues to happen, clearly we're devaluing the dollar, over and over again by sort of printing more money to create these, Does that at some point concern, us in terms of our liquidity and our and our savings, services and tools? And
I think it all trickles down. It starts at the highest level where, like you said, the federal government is printing money. But I'm not an expert on that. But the one thing that's been missing a lot from the news, at least that I've seen, is we see the areas where the pandemic has hit harder, and some are coming out, some are recovering, some are going back into lockdown. But we don't hear a lot about the financial impact in some of these other countries. So, I think it would be interesting to know, because if everybody's kind of floating down together, then you're really not losing a lot of value. If there are wide disparities between those that are and those that aren't, that's when the value begins to really kind of get out of whack.
yeah, I get your point. So yeah, if everybody's devaluing, if the water in the harbor is lowering, all the ships lower with it.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes some sense. This is usually a topic for Tom, but Tom couldn't make it today. But this is one of those things where I also think that your local AGs and your local feds are also going to be, have an impact on this as well. Jonathan, I know you were talking about some of the things like protecting the stimulus and different things that have come down. Has there been any more new rules in the New York area based on things that are happening that has impacted you?
So yeah, it's interesting. We're keeping a close eye out on that, and so far, the state AG's office has been pretty quiet after they sort of issued this mandate that we all try and protect the stimulus payments. It's interesting. Governor Cuomo in his last public address, and he does I think it was actually this morning, sort of reiterated that, the state AG and all of the various state departments will continue to look at and make, rules and sort of guidance for all of, the sort of regulated industries in New York, if any change they deem any changes necessary based on the pandemic and the COVID response. So while there haven't been any new ones, he did make it very clear that, if they feel as though anything else is needed, they have the authority to do it. So it's keeping us on our toes.
So at any minute, you could have something related to
Right.
the new reopening or any number of things that pop up, which I think the next shoe to fall is likely going to be, this next round of stimulus, particularly as it relates to the new PPP loans. And also, we're coming up on that June date where everyone's going to have to qualify the past PPP loans. And so, yeah, it's just, I believe that this wave is starting to roll through. Jonathan, I don't know if you were here last week. I think you
Yeah,
were.
I was here.
You spoke to Brett. Did you hear Gary's numbers on unemployment? Have you guys run anything like that?
We haven't, but so we're starting to run some interesting, just trying to look at data in the core, and so we're doing a bunch of analysis on unemployment payments coming in to members. And what we've seen, the actual numbers, the aggregate numbers are still fairly small, but the trend is very clear. And so basically since beginning mid-April to now, it's not a curve, it's almost a straight line in terms of growth in unemployment payments coming into shares in the credit union. So it is definitely becoming a very commonplace occurrence among at least a segment of our membership, and they are receiving unemployment benefits. And the other interesting thing is that now we're starting to hear sort of, it's not official communications, and they're sort of mentioned in passing, and our staff are talking to their contacts and friends and family, and we're starting to hear that some of the people that are taking unemployment, are starting to have to weigh this balance of, I'm a restaurant server, I was making X $100 a week, but at this point, the unemployment plus the extra $600 for in unemployment payments that the government is giving out right now was actually a better weekly salary than they were earning. So it's this interesting conundrum where we're seeing these people, and they're trying to make ends meet, and yet now the calculus has become, in some cases, it's actually better for them to stay on the unemployment than it is to try and go back to work. So
yeah, it's like we inadvertently created universal basic income.
Right, exactly. So we're curious to see where that goes, and I'm interested to see where our sort of county's unemployment numbers go, especially within the service sectors like restaurants and that type of industry, because those are the people that seem to be making this calculation, especially about, do I stay on unemployment or do I try and go and get my serving job back or something similar. So that is definitely going to be an interesting dynamic as this continues.
Well, the other dynamic that is playing out is as you put it, the calculus of what to do when your company wants you back. You can't work from home, but the schools aren't open, and you have kids. And so, they're sort of insisting you come back, but you don't really have anything to do with the kids. Your options are limited because school's not in play. You're also, given some of the new news about children and the pieces of it that are still coming together. That's of great concern.
We are, yeah. So I'll tell you that is forefront in our minds. And so in the past, so we're looking at, we're putting our plans together to try and gradually reopen both branches and our corporate headquarters. And 2 weeks ago, uh, we put out a return to work survey to staff. And, we're specifically asking, are you impacted by schools being closed, those sort of things. And we're using that to inform our approach, and specifically, how do we make reasonable accommodations to those staff? And I think what I'm expecting, I think we're all expecting at a management level, is we are going to have a significant number of staff that continue to work remotely because they either don't have childcare options, or what I think we're also going to see is we're going to have a lot of parents that may have access to childcare, but they don't feel it's safe enough for their kids to be at.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's going to formulate, this other piece of a decision where people just don't feel comfortable going back yet. So that's, the other thing that was interesting was, and I think Cuomo mentioned it today in his comments, was the idea that that large organizations are using this as an excuse to do some layoffs. But the idea is that as the organizations look at this, I mean, if we look at the basic premise of 10 years of digital transformation in 3 months, that changes the whole mix of the branch and everything else. And I think we're going to see more of that, where people have to make difficult decisions as it relates to, this hat just is not straight and it's driving me crazy. There we go. And you don't want to see the haircut I gave myself. So this is all we really have here. But the idea that we have to figure out what we're going to do with the branches, and what we're going to figure out as that goes. Are you guys looking at, like, okay, let's say that we had to skinny down, but we don't want to skinny down. What would we take and do with those people as more and more transition to digital services, and less and less less and less are needed for call centers and other direct interaction?
for us, I will say that we've always taken the approach, and in my 8+ years with Hudson Valley now, I'm happy to say, and I'm proud that we've never had to approach this type of scenario with any kind of thing like a layoff in mind. Generally, our approach to, if we need to reduce staffing, and honestly, we probably conduct staffing surveys at least every couple of years, especially through our branch network, to see if our efficiencies are such that they necessitate the staffing level we have or anything like that. And our general approach is to reduce staffing if needed through attrition, which actually is fairly efficient within the branch networks, at least, because we have a lot of not necessarily, well, in our organization, we have quite a few part-time positions in our branch network, and they tend to be less long-term employees than some of our full-time positions. So we can generally reduce through attrition that way fairly reliably if need be. I think, part of what's happening too, and as we transition to digital services, we've been putting a lot of renewed focus on knowledge management, sort of project management, reshaping some of the organization that way, because we have to look at sort of a workforce that's more dedicated to delivering new services rather than the status quo. And I think we have been able to shift some of our staff to positions that are now more in line with knowledge management, pushing knowledge out to members, staff, project management type roles, and coordination. And then also, honestly, our lending departments have taken on a new level of importance with how they handle all of these P3 loans and everything else. And we've honestly taken a lot of our branch staff that were being underutilized during this whole process and transitioned them into our lending roles, which luckily for our platform staff in the branches, they're already essentially cross-trained as consumer loan originators largely. And so they were able to sort of shift into those roles. And we don't see that necessarily going away anytime soon. There's a lot of volume, especially a lot of digital volume now that we didn't have before all of our branches were essentially closed to the public. So if that remains, we're going to have sort of a shift in staffing requirements internally, which hopefully will allow a lot of these branch staff members that if their roles really aren't as needed anymore, we can shift them into other positions. But yeah, it's a difficult environment. I would say that the last time we were faced with potential staffing changes like this is honestly when we went through our core conversion back in 2015, when we came off of Ultradata and went to the Epicus platform, and we realized a lot more efficiency, and we had to make staffing decisions based on those new efficiencies. And so we're definitely in a position where, you know, after this settles out a bit more and we see where the staffing is needed, we're probably going to be looking at potentially bleeding some FTE off through attrition in the long run, which is okay. But
yeah. Do you have anybody I wonder if any Canadians that have anybody that is in that situation where the unemployment would be better than the money they make, say, at the teller line or something?
It's you know, for our area, it's kind of interesting. I mean, with New York State's minimum wage laws the way that they are, you know, I think our tellers are probably not as likely to be in that position, although, you know, conceivably, especially if they were, you know, part-time worker or something like that, they may have the possibility of being
Well,
in
and if
that
you
boat.
factor in childcare, that
Very,
changes the
very
equation
true.
altogether.
Very true. So yeah, we still have some fairly sort of manual positions, like the folks that process our mailed in transactions and things like that, you know, conceivably they could be in that boat where unemployment plus that extra $600 is going to make it a more attractive deal than potentially staying in the role that they're in.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I did a group of videos last year, and one of them was sort of how to prepare for AI, and I think it applies, which is,
Yep.
I think everybody's got to start thinking right now about what to do with, I'm going to use the word extraneous, but it's not a good word. You know, I guess extraneous staff, where what's the next best thing for them to work on, and how do you cross-train them and create, you know, a more effective workforce? Because I love that, you know, Cranes went through 2008 trying very hard not to have any attrition, not to close things, not to upset that apple cart. And, you know, there is opportunity, I think, to transform all of those workers into something more valuable. The question is I don't think it's something that's always going to be, I think the first 3 things are going to be obvious, but the next 10, and that's the next 10 positions, aren't going to be. And so it may take some planning to start thinking about that now, to reach out to different areas of the departments at the credit union to say, hey, you know, does anybody, you know, feel like they're being overwhelmed in this digital transformation or transition, and could you use more help if there was capacity at the branches or those kinds of areas? And if so, what do you have in place to do training so that it's not, you know, because the worst thing you can do is go, oh, we got something for you, and dump them into chaos and, you know, have a bigger mess. Mike, you seem like you want to say something other than we can't hear you. You're just yakking.
No, I'm in total agreement with what you guys are saying. And just to this is obviously the understatement of the day is that this is going to change everything, staffing included, and how to have your staff more effective. Like you said, John, I mean, just how to make them more effective, more efficient. And then this may create new opportunities for them too, you know? So
Yeah.
I think there's that upside, you know, like you said, John, just train them in this other area where they can have more opportunity to grow. Could be, you know, a change in their career path.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think Jonathan would agree, I know Kevin would, that these departments that suddenly need more capacity, they're used to adding like one person every 5 years. And so, you know, they just toss them in the tank with the other fish and they sort of figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Mass training a group on something that can be, you know, for example, let's say that the Fed drops rates enough to make mortgages a real desirable thing in a way to try to get people to get homes. I don't know, I'm just making it up. But, and there's some sort of new first loan process or something, you know, that whole group that does those kinds of processing in the mortgage space, that's a very specialized thing. And training it takes time, particularly if there's a new process, you know, out there. So I think that's the lesson I'm hearing from Jonathan, is the success they've had has been by sort of trying to plan for this and see around the curve. So I'm sure others are doing it, but if you're not, certainly, you know, I think you almost have to run a tabletop game, Mike, that says, you know, what would happen if we had to close A, B, and C branch? What would we do with those people?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just start making, you know, I mean, you hate to play those types of games, but, you know, we do the same thing for, you know, disaster recovery, business continuity planning.
Right. You're gonna have to.
I think you got to game it out.
Well, that's what I mean. Brett alluded to that last week when he said, what, 30% of the branches were going to be closed anyway, or something like that. So,
oh, he always says that though. You know, I'm surprised he didn't say 100. You know,
the branch is dead.
Well, I think the version of the branch we have is dead. I think Jonathan.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's going to evolve. That's what I think.
It's going to evolve. Yeah, I think that's the difference is, and what he's saying is that they're going to be less about. I think you said status quo, which to me is the, you know, do you want to deposit or do you want to withdraw? And more about, okay, how do I make your financial health better? And here are some services we have to do that, because that's what we're going to be dealing with, which is a good lead into kind of our next subject here, which Kevin really brought up. Let's go ahead and spin up that slide there, Melissa. So, you know, we were looking at a Harvard Review article that was talking about how do you lead your team through this, right? And they started to lay out these time horizons and these phases. The first one was the shelter in place, which we all experienced when in town halls 1 through 5, and in some cases ongoing into 7 and 8. And then we have this reopening phase, and that one's really hard because we literally just don't know what to expect, right? As we reopen branches, as we reopen things, particularly if you're in a hard hit area like where Jonathan is in New York. And I think, and this one could be a repeating loop where you're open, things are good, there's an outbreak, you got to close and back through it again. And what the results of that cycle are, I don't know yet. But you know, I think you also got to keep that in mind, that you could be looping through this several times. But then you get to this third phase, and it's this post-COVID-19 phase. And Kevin, I think you were kind of putting some thought into this, right?
Yeah, I think we're definitely still in the reopening phase and just really getting into it. But, you know, I think our jobs collectively are to think ahead and to try and plan for what may be coming. And, you know, even we've talked a little bit about financial performance. You know, what's this going to do to your financial performance, and how long can you keep these extra employees on? And, you know, can you turn them into collections counselors so that they're able to kind of help, you know, take a credit union member friendly, as much as you can, approach to collections and trying to help the member through trying to get those payments made. You know, we talked a little bit about a few weeks ago, we talked a little bit today about branch planning. You know, all of us have heard the stories about the open concept branches. And so what are you going to do with these branches that have teller pods instead of a teller line, and no bandit barriers, no
Yeah,
you
no
know,
sneeze
no
shields.
defined, yeah. That's pretty much where you're going.
Yeah, and they're
You
already
know,
doing it. People are putting up these plexiglass.
oh,
I think,
absolutely.
yeah, Jonathan talked about they were outfitting theirs. Jonathan, are your branches open again? Just real quick, Kevin.
So at this point, we have not opened the branches in what I would call any kind of normal capacity. We are in the next, and honestly, we're kind of having to play it by ear because of the way Cuomo is sort of reopening businesses in the state, even though we're technically an essential business. We're expecting to have all of our branch lobbies open to appointments in the next, I would say, week and a half, and then from there will be a gradual reopening of branches and sort of what I would call traditional lobby services. The issue though is, and honestly, what we're thinking about, and this is, I'm sure, playing into other areas, is not only the disease and safety aspect there, but also the security aspect. People being required to wear masks. How do you maintain the security of your locations? How do you check IDs, all of that kind of stuff? So we're trying to really work through all of that before we open up to what I would call just sort of that traditional service model of a branch again.
So did you get the sneeze? Last time I talked to you, you were putting stickers on the ground and sneeze shields in, or whatever, the plexiglass. Did that get done?
So yeah, we have put in those types of barriers. We've got the little social distancing icon, graphics, iconography in and around our facilities, so that people don't get too close to each other. So it's, is it 100? I don't know. It's a good reminder. I think what's interesting around us though is that either the people are taking this type of guidance to heart, or they're not, and there are still plenty of people that don't seem to care one bit about the safety guidance for how to handle yourself and keep yourself safe during this thing. And I think that's the other challenge that we're going to have is, when we do open up our branches to general lobby service again, just how hard of a line are we going to take, and are we prepared
To have
for
your arm broke like the poor Target guy?
that's right. And I'll tell you, we've had at least one incident where thankfully it didn't involve our staff, but we had members at one of our branches get into a physical altercation not that long ago. So the tensions are running high, and
Yeah.
people are not thinking straight in some cases. So we're very conscious of the possibility that there could be incidents when we do this.
It's Mike was talking about Citizens Bank, and I think that Brett brought this up. Jill Castalia, she does lots of things, and I know Brett's on some different things with her, but they're doing curbside banking.
Yeah.
But coming back around, and this is where Kevin was going, I think, is, do you require masks? And good news is you got a guy there with a gun usually, so that'll be easy to enforce. But I had someone, I was wearing a mask, and I had someone say, just go the freak home if that's what you need to do. And I was like, dude, I don't, okay. It's hard not to punch somebody that says something like that. By the way, freak wasn't the word he said, but it's difficult. We're gonna really see that divide, and I do agree that what are you gonna do with that? So I was just interested to see. But Kevin, going back to you here, just with that information, where does that take you with some of these questions you have here?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think, different actions are going to produce outcome, and we're going to be trying to figure out which ones. We've now encouraged drive-up usage, and perhaps members are now more comfortable with it. So do they stay there? and
But
don't
you
go
don't
into
even
your
have
branch.
drive-ups in California, right?
Right. We have, yeah,
So that's going to have to be curbside banking, right?
yeah, yeah. And most financial institutions, because we don't have drive-ups, most of them, their branches were open, um, at least on a limited basis. And of course, you had to wear a mask and that type of thing. But
Yeah.
you know, there's the impact of cash usage. There's two sides of this story. There's the, you know, we've had members that, you know, we've raised withdrawal limits, and you know, so you have members that are hoarding cash, not sure why, but worried about cash shortages. And then on the flip side, you have members who don't want to use cash because it's not the cleanest. You know, it's been through a lot of hands before it's reached yours, and so people are worried about passing the virus through cash. You know, the online and mobile, this is a great opportunity, and I think a lot of members have probably, out of necessity, made the transition on online and mobile banking, to the point where some of the providers had capacity issues. So, you know, what do we do to prepare? What does the future look like? Do those people stay in those in the digital channels, and or do they go back to their old habits afterwards? My guess is they will stay with their new, and you know, as long as those channels worked well for them, I think they'll stay. And then the last one I talked a little bit about, you know, collection staff and guidelines. We talked a little bit about, you know, childcare and what that's going to be. You know, I've heard of collections areas that are actually going to job share and childcare share as well. So they're going to split the week.
How does that work, Kevin?
They're going to split the week. And so on Mondays and Wednesdays, you're going to take my kids and I'm going to go to work at the credit union. And the next, on Tuesday and Thursday, it's the opposite. And on Friday, it's both are working from home days, because those are non-meeting days.
That's really fascinating. You know, I was, and my wife runs a company that does Department of Defense, you know, Department of Defense staffing on big projects and things. And one of the stuff that's happened out here is they've had enough cases in a couple of the facilities, particularly the SCIFs, which stands for, you heard a lot about it during the impeachment process. It's Secure Compartment, something or other, information facility or something like that. But because they're small and they have a, you know, a lot of distance, they've gone to what they call a gold team and I don't know, the blue team, I think. And gold team comes in one week, blue team comes in the other, but they all get paid for 80 hours a week, but they only work 40. And I was like, how can I get that deal?
Yeah.
I need to work for the government. But, you know, you make a good point on the staffing guidelines. But the other thing is, what about ramping up collection staffing? Because that was the game changer for us at Westcom when 2008 hit, was the decision to bring in, what was it? We went from 5 collections people to 80?
Yeah, and put in, you know, a lot of technology, put in a dialer, and, you know, along with Screen Pop, the whole call center upgrade that took place. I mean, it was a massive change to get done in a short amount of time.
So Kevin, on the other thing, I think that in terms of the new normal that we're going to have to seriously consider as time goes on is what happens to the work from home? Like, for example, we made it all work. It's going to be hard to take it back. We talked about that before, but I want to just bring up, say, Twitter. Was it Twitter or Google? I think it was Twitter that just basically said, if you can work at home, you could work at home for the rest of your life for us. You know, did you see that article?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to make the transition for those there'll be those of us who run to an office to get out of the house, but I think there are a lot of people who are used to it, and, you know, we used to have rules around working remotely, that they had to have a dedicated space, and they, you know, that they couldn't you know, that they weren't really allowed to be taking care of their kids. You needed to be, quote unquote, at work, and they signed a remote worker agreement that said that.
Yeah.
Now it's, you know, it's the norm that the dog barking, the kids screaming, you know, all of that going on in the background, and you try to manage it as best you can, but everybody's in a similar spot. So
Yeah, I've all got used to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Jake,
it would
good.
be tough, you know, it's kind of like a part of this financial thing too. If you're not paying for childcare and you're staying at home, and you have to be at home anyways to help with the remote work from school, you know, it's going to be an interesting transition, and to see how people handle it, because it's you know, it's never it'll never be the same, but how people respond, it's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Jason Salzar from Arapahoe said they're open as of this week. And I know, Jason, would you mind, do you mind unmuting and giving us a little input in how that's going?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, man. Thanks for speaking up.
Yeah, most definitely. Forgive me if my kids start doing the crazy stuff in the background, because I do have them here. Yeah, so we opened as of Monday, and we've kind of put some things in place. Very similar to kind of what you guys were talking about. We have the social distancing stickers both inside and outside of our branches. We have chosen to allow members to line up outside of the branches. So we've got dividers, one to kind of for an ATM access line, and then one for like members that want to actually utilize a teller or like a member service representative. And so there's, you know, signage and instructions. There's the placements outside for them to step on to kind of keep the social distancing. We have decided to have a greeter, which is kind of more on a rotating schedule, which that individual will kind of manage what happens outside and allow people in and outside of the building. And we are only allowing one person in for every person that's available to help, keeping it at a minimum of 10 people. That's including with staff as well. So, like, you know, if a teller is available to take a new person, then we'll let somebody in. The greeter will allow them into the building and then go back out and kind of manage that everybody's still keeping their social distancing. And so far that has worked really well for us. We are requiring masks.
I was going to say, but Denver requires masks anyway, so it's not so hard, is it? Or are you in Aurora?
We're actually in Arapahoe County, so it's not mandated there yet.
Oh, okay.
But it is something we chose to make it a must for them to enter the building, and our staff is wearing them as well. So we did purchase height strip cameras that we put into our lot, like the actual. It's because to get into our building you have to enter our ATM vestibule. So we actually put those in our ATM vestibule, and members will actually pull down their mask, show the camera before they actually enter our building, and then we let them in at that point from a security standpoint. And then, of course, if a staff is helping them with like a withdrawal and then they just don't feel comfortable with them having their masks on, they are told to pull it down one more time just to give them that brief, you know, look at their face. These are all things that we placed in signage, and we've kind of informed our membership before we actually opened up. But believe it or not, we haven't had much pushback yet.
I'm really surprised. I mean, we live in a place where that could be, I mean, if that was down here in Colorado Springs, you could have some pushback for sure.
Yeah, I had one member prior to us even opening kind of complaining. I actually picked up the phone and spoke with him. One of my marketing guys actually read an article on Yahoo that basically said that, you know, if we're not following practices, our best practices as a business, and something happens where it breaks place from our institution, that we could be liable and sued. And so, you know, I don't know how true and in depth that is, but, you know, I've kind of used that as when I was explaining it to that person, kind of telling him that we're doing this for, you know, peace of mind for our staff, but also to keep you guys safe. We purchased germ shields and all those things for our teller line and for our member service desk and branch manager desk. So we're definitely trying to take all the precautions as possible to, you know, keep everybody safe. You know, nothing is foolproof at this point, but all these other businesses seem to manage it pretty well, like, grocery stores and.
Oh yeah, Walmart has a person outside for, basically clicking people in and clicking people out.
Yeah, I actually witnessed that this week.
Yeah, I was surprised too. It was like, so I asked the lady, how many can be in there? She said 1,008.
Really?
Precisely.
Yeah, that's what she told me. It's 1,008. And I said, well, what's that based on? And she said it was the number of people already in there and square footage and guidelines from Walmart, which I assume came from CDC or something. Is there any guidelines you were following for the number of people, or you just decided to keep it literally to the thinnest limit you can, which is you got to be being helped by someone?
Yeah, we did that more just for the control piece. We didn't really want people in the lobbies if it's unnecessary. Like Monday was our first day, and of course it was raining on Monday. So, we're kind of learning as we go. So now we decided to go and purchase some, tents to put outside for days like that. So that way we don't have people complaining that they're sitting and getting wet while they're waiting. Our lines have not built up though. I think we anticipated it to be
Yeah, I
a
was
lot
going to ask.
busier.
Yeah, are you turning away? Like, what happens when you close and there's still people outside?
Yeah, we haven't had that problem yet. I mean, I think we have our Centennial office, which isn't as busier because it's more our members. They haven't formed a line yet. It's been pretty much in and out for members. Our Inglewood office, they have a bigger volume of share branching members, and so they've had a couple lines, but the lines
But
didn't.
you do have shared branching back on too. Okay.
We do, yeah. We're one of the few who still have it, which is good, and
Yeah.
hopefully the more people that open up will start giving more people access to that as well. So,
Yeah,
but I
go
thought
ahead,
it was
sorry.
good to share.
The other question I had about that was, so that would sort of, the fact that you're not developing lines sort of is bearing out what we were saying, which is probably one of two things, probably more digital, which I'm sure you've experienced, and then a certain amount of fear associated with going to the branch.
Right.
And,
I will say we have a drive up at one of our locations, and that location that has a drive up, that's the one that hasn't had a line formed, but the drive is still backed up on the daily. So I think a lot of it has to do with if they don't have to, they don't want to come in.
as long as you don't look like a Dutch Brothers. I don't know what the heck, when Dutch Brothers became the most important franchise ever, but we have Dutch Brothers all of a sudden. They just showed up like in a year or so, and they have lines all the way around the building and out into the parking lot. I'd never even heard of them before, I saw that. So, yeah, it's coffee or juice or I don't know, something. No, thank you for sharing, Jason. That's important information for everyone to hear. Matt from Premier Members also just mentioned that they opened. Matt, did you want to share a little bit, and what you're experiencing?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, Matt, where are you at? Which grade? Where's your location?
Yeah, we're headquartered in Boulder, and so we're Castle Rock to Estes Park.
Oh
wow, you cover a lot of distance. Yeah, Castle Rock's just up the road from me. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I should say we just completed a merger, so we're actually in Pueblo now as well. So really, it's Pueblo now to Estes Park. So we've got a lot of space covered, and of course, a lot of municipalities and counties to think about, and kind of
a lot of different rules.
Yeah, lots of different rules, right? Can become unwieldy for sure. And so I'll be quicker because what you just heard is very, very similar to what we're doing. I like the camera idea. We didn't explore that. I think the difference there is we have a staff member posted, they're at the doors and they're engaging with the folks as we have lines outside and, talking to them, making sure we've got some engagement there because they are wearing masks. So the camera is an interesting idea that I'll kick around, but really, really almost identical experience so far through 2.5 days now. Not a mad rush at the doors by any stretch. The volume continues to be mostly through the drive-through. People are just used to and comfortable with it, so which is fine. Staff apprehensive of course, but are getting better and getting comfortable. Face shield, all of that. We struggled with the idea on requiring face coverings, right? Masks. And we actually elected to do the same thing. We did put a requirement. So our signs say they're required. We sent communications out to our members email that said masks are required. Little little apprehensive about that for the reasons you mentioned earlier, John, but we really have not had a lot of pushback. You know, a handful of folks that, of course, like it and, you know, have made the choice to go through the drive up. And in some instances, you know, we don't have drive ups at every single location. So there are instances where they make that election and drive to another location, but nobody, you know, what I would consider, you know, irate. They understand, they get it, they're exercising their choice. So I would call it member choice versus member complaint so far in terms of what we're experiencing on the required mask piece. And we're just going to kind of stay flexible with that. If that changes, we'll reevaluate. But it was in where we landed was after all the considerations that, you know, you guys are very well aware of. You know, our staff generally felt more comfortable if we were to put that requirement in place. And we were very acutely tuned to making sure our staff feel comfortable in this. And so what we're doing, we opened up, we have a maximum by location because every location is different, obviously, in size. So we did establish a maximum number of both members and employees that we're going to have, you know, staffing and allowing into the branch. So the queuing is outside for us when that happens, and we haven't had long lines, but that's where it'll happen. All the social distancing cues in place, as was mentioned, face shields. And the way we did it was really just, you know, we had each branch manager assess their branch. How many members can we allow in with the staff there to serve them and maintain that social distancing? I think the reason we did it that way was, one, we want to maintain that, right? It's a big topic and a big deal, but also if we make a decision to release the mask or face covering requirement, I'll give you for instance, in Boulder County, their health order came out saying businesses will require, you know, patrons to wear masks unless you can maintain the social distancing guidelines. So if we have to back off from that, from a Boulder County perspective anyway, we're still, you know, technically meeting the health order. So that's how we went about it. And
yeah. Well, and to your point, I mean, like Boulder, you wouldn't have a problem getting people to wear 3 masks, you know, one on their face and 2 other ones. But then you got Pueblo where they just issued, you know, it's a whole different environment. And then you've got the Springs, which is a whole different environment. And I think many organizations are going to face that sort of cross-cultural challenge as they are, you know, regionally dispersed in different areas and controlled by different politicians and different rules. And so, yeah, that's very interesting. But glad to hear you guys, you know, did that, and it's really nice that everybody's sharing because that's what we're here for. And you know, I love hearing you say, "Oh, I like the camera idea." Well, that's why we're here. That's what we want to do is take good ideas from one place and apply them to another. We're coming to the end here. We blocked these out for an hour. Does anybody else have anything that they want to share that they've been doing as they've been reopening, or feel like, you know, Gary, I was going to check. I always check in with Gary at the end. Gary's my closer because he used to play for, you know, the Red Sox, his favorite team. But before I do that, is there anything else anybody wants to share in terms of, you know, best practices and what they're seeing that's been working? All right, now I'll switch over to Gary. Mr. Coates, would you mind unmuting yourself? Hey, man.
Good to see you. So I'm curious about the camera idea. Is there an employee there and they take the picture through the window, or do they actually?
Probably just a camera up. Well, I'll let Jason answer, but I assume it's their normal camera that they have. They just need to pull down the mask for their regular camera to pick them up. But go ahead, Jason.
Right. Yeah, we installed, so you know the height strips that the cameras that you usually see when you're exiting the building, we actually put those same cameras installed when you're coming into the building. So we actually had the branch managers kind of test to see where the good spots were and we put stickers down for members to stand on. And then we also thought about, you know, those members that, you know, are handicapped and those types of things. So we put stickers even for them. And so the greeter will take the individual over, have them stand on there and have them slightly pull it down. And the camera just records their face and that's it. So it's not necessarily stickers, it's just recording it.
It'd be nice if you could give them a placard to hold maybe with their name and member number, and then they could turn in each direction, and then I
You
think that
know,
would be good as well.
With the
we
credit union
definitely
logo.
considered that.
I still think you should give out masks with the credit union logo. Go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you know, we actually thought about that too. We ordered a bunch of masks for our staff, and we were like, well, do we give masks? But I mean, the pricing on
Just
it's
a big
so
picture of a
expensive.
cell phone and an advertisement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, I had an idea the other day. What if I could print the bottom half of your face on the mask? I've been thinking about that one a lot. I think I got a good business idea there. But no, I think that, you know, Gary, it sounds like that's something you guys would be considering.
Yeah, it's a really great idea. I've not heard of it talked about yet, so I'm going to definitely take it to our branch staff and try to figure out how we can incorporate that before we start to reopen the branches to members. The other thing from last week's call, you had suggested taking that the member unemployment report and
Yeah.
cross-reference it with what loans they have with us. I checked right before this call. It's not done yet, but I talked with my BI team and we started working on that last week. So we will get that. And then I shared that with our collections department. They're very excited to get that information. If for no other reason, to look at what our risk exposure potentially is for those people if they stay on unemployment for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly the kind of canary in the coal mine kind of stuff that we're trying to find. And as soon as you said, I was like, oh, okay. So what do those guys have? So that's fascinating. You know, I think, you know, I can't wait to see those. Also, I'm interested in, you know, it seems like you've been running that unemployment on a monthly basis. But the reason you do that is because the payments are done probably in certain intervals, the checks.
Yeah, they come in every week.
Okay. Yeah,
So
I'd love to know a little, man, if you wanted to do that sooner, I would love to trend that because I think you're onto something there. You know, the other side of some other things, I want to let everybody know. So I think last week or sometime before I mentioned, I was looking at a way, one of the things I think people are going to need is some sort of card on file, recurring transfer list of things that are nickeling and diming you. You know, hey, the thing you saw on PayPal every month that's $3.99 that you went, it's not worth $3.99 to go chase it down, but you can't remember what it was and you never go get it. But then right now, $3.99 needs to go along with a lot of other stuff because of the way the world is. So I've been working on that. I actually have a bit done for Scimitar and was looking at integrating it into other home banking. So if anybody's interested in that, wants to talk about it with me, you know, we've been doing, as I said, integration for Alchemy, also Banno, and you know, we're happy to, and also ConnectFS. So we're happy to talk about that. But I think that would be a big one too that people would appreciate, is being able to get just a list of all that stuff that's recurring, so they can go track it down and try to deal with it. I think when Jonathan talks about the new stuff that we're going to need, those are the kinds of services I think we're going to want to, and I don't think we need to wait around anymore to enroll people in them. I think we just do it. Just like I think we should turn on alerts for deposits for the stimulus checks. I think there's a lot of things that credit unions by and large have been too, I want to use the word meek about, in terms of turning things on and waiting, because members never find the services because we're too, meek in doing that. So, yeah, that's something that we're definitely looking at, and helping people to push that. I think there's a lot of things. Look, I just ran Mike off. He's done. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do that. So if you're interested, please hit Melissa or me. Jonathan said he's interested, so I'm happy to chat with you, Jonathan. I'll share that. But I think there's going to be a lot of those little widgets. Kevin and I have been talking about other ones, and Gary, you have a lot of ideas as well. So, hey, Gary, is Unitas open or no?
Our 4 branches with drive-ups are still open. The in-lobby are still not open.
Any plans on opening it?
We're looking at getting the plexiglass barriers, and I believe those are in the process of getting installed in preparation for opening the branches. Oregon is the Portland Metro, which is where most of our branches are not looking to open for phase 1 yet with other businesses. So we're kind of watching that and will kind of parallel that, I think, as we start to open up. But all the rural counties in Oregon have all applied with the governor to start opening in phase one, which is, hair salons and some restaurants with, limited capacity and stuff like that. So another report that I looked at is the top merchants report recently.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting, from January through April, Amazon has grown by almost $7 million in payments. So a lot of our members,
surprising at all.
yeah, I know it's not surprising, just.
But it also speaks to that. Remember the study that we did where we determined that branch members use Walmart and digital members use Amazon. So what I'd love to know, if you want to have some fun, Gary, and I know you love these sorts of things, how many new Amazon purchases do you have in the last 3 months? Like, is the first time they bought something from Amazon with their Unitas card?
Well, we're gonna, because of the dollar amount and increased volume, we're gonna start digging into those numbers to see if there's any communication we can have with those members.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah,
just for debit card. I haven't looked at credit card yet. I'm sure the credit card numbers. Amazon was always at the top for credit card because a lot of people don't, because it's online, they don't want to use their debit card. They want to use their credit card. But interestingly,
that makes a difference, but okay.
Yeah, but interestingly, it's grown significantly on the debit card side, which initially kind of surprised me a little.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of metrics that we've got to watch, and getting back to that new normal concept, and I'll close it out with this, is new normal also includes new KPI, new key performance indicators. What we used to use to determine how things were doing may not be relevant anymore. I think that was Kevin's whole point. The metrics Kevin used to watch to determine the ATMs may not be valid. I mean, all of these things that were behavioral and cultural, that we had learned in our reporting, that we had built our businesses around, they're all gone. And how do you plan for, statistical analysis, historical analysis, even predictive, all is based on past history. And if you don't have enough past, or if the past is too volatile, there's no way to go to predict it. And so that's where we are. And all we can really do is, at that point, I believe, is create the most flexible systems we can. So with that in mind, Mike, any closing thoughts?
No, I always enjoy these, and I love the camera idea that everyone's talking about here. So I think that's a really cool deal. And also just a heads up, next week I'm going to be talking to the folks from Momentum. They were the ones that did that branch redesign at Front Wave here in San Diego. So I'm going to be talking to them about, okay, what's the new way of designing branches now that all of this is happening?
That's the key, Saran wrap.
Saran wrap, exactly.
We use a lot of Saran wrap. You don't even have to put the sneeze shells up if you just Saran wrap the teller.
Exactly. I'm going to mention that. I think that's a step one.
Or I heard about people who've been making it easier by cutting holes.
I heard that too in their mask
as well,
so they can breathe better.
Jonathan does that. So
yeah. It's all about breathing better. So yeah. Next, I'm also talking. Dr. Joseph Breeden's going to be back on from Deep Future Thinking. So he's going to talk about the V scenarios in the recession, the
versus
U
the
and
W and the U.
So he's gonna be talking about that. So
Brett seemed to be pretty hot on the W. So
yeah, I think that might be the case.
Yeah, well, we'll let Jonathan's at the tip of the spear, so he'll let us know.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Also, thanks to everyone that participated today. This will be put out there as a recording. I'm sure there's going to be some great snippets to grab, particularly on the opening stuff and what's going on there. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.